Here Is Better brings you The Last Train. Christian had really started his life when the world was shutting down for COVID. He had just turned 19 years old and had a van life dream pulsing in his veins. So he traded in the Sentra for a gray SUV with enough room in the back for everything he would need for life on the road. What it didn't come with was money, and he found that TikTok views became his only source of income, and he couldn't complain about that. Traveling to haunted hotspots was slow in the beginning, but then a certain haunted hotel in Pennsylvania seemed to show a ghostly apparition in second 59 of a 1-minute video. 100,000 followers overnight. Christian had been chasing that high ever since. But the real ghosts were few and far between. A light that flickered anytime he approached, 120,000 views. He could hear a baby crying in the cemetery, 100,000 views. Those were enough, with budgeting, to make his life comfortable. He ate a lot of sandwiches and he filled a 5-gallon container with water every couple of days, but he was happy. Watching the pandemic news, the specter of certain death stalking every corner of America, Christian decided it was time to head to the interior of the country. He found endless cornfields, highways as far as he could see. He did take a face mask everywhere he went, mostly because places wouldn't serve him food without it. But the interior, the flyover of the United States, was mostly unchanged. Really kind people, great food, and room to wander. Polk, Nebraska, a tiny town with lots of corn and wheat fields, and a very, very old ghost story. A train wreck in 1900 during a freak blizzard. It wasn't the coldest winter in Nebraska, but the storm was so vicious and fast that the train conductors had no idea it was coming and were ill prepared. Maybe they missed a turn. Maybe the whiteout conditions made them not slow down, or the brakes slid. Maybe they hit something, but that locomotive derailed so fast that pieces were left over a square mile and there were no survivors. He whispered to himself, "I guess I'm going to Polkin," as he turned the car. He found a diner there that was still open at 7 p.m., while the rest of the town was dark. Ordering a dinner of real food, steak and mashed potatoes, he took a good long breath before going live. His live videos were routine, marked at 8 o'clock hour, wherever he happened to be. He chatted into the phone screen, gaining viewers by the half second. He had a loyal, talkative following, and before he could even finish his location, the viewers were messaging, "Check out the Polkin Ghost Train. The ghost train is fake. My cousin lives there." He was so used to live broadcasts that he didn't even notice the man at the bar top staring at him. His live went on for 1 hour, just as planned. Someone gifted him $20 and told him to check out the homemade chocolate silk pie next door when the town reopened tomorrow. He sat back, trying to decide where to sleep, when he heard a voice. "You hear about the train?" It was an older guy, maybe 70. Yeah, I sure am." He was always careful to be respectful, as he could be, as one could never tell if someone would be offended at a streamer in their town talking about their dirty laundry. "It's a really nice town, and I'm just passing through." "Well, it sure sounds like it. You know, that blizzard came in the middle of a mild winter, like it was sneaking up on us. My great-great-grandpa helped bury all the victims. Every newspaper man in the country showed up." "Seems like media hasn't changed much," Christian said, thinking of the news covering the pandemic. He took a long drink of his coffee and looked at Christian. "No, sir, they have not." Christian didn't count himself as media, but it chilled him to have the old-timer stare at him as he said it. "You know, that ghost story isn't about just the crash, not really. The real story is the people that came after. You know, the looky-loos, the newspaper men who wanted to sift through the wreckage for pictures of just tragedy." He took another drink and sighed. "There's no need for that kind of disrespect." "Oh, I agree," Christian said solemnly. "And, you know, there's an old legend, though, at midnight. If you go to the site, it's right at the dirt road where you turn left on Sycamore. You know, this train stopped running in the 20s. Christian was mentally jotting down the notes as he spoke. "Well, you got to bring a cigarette for the conductor and a train whistle to call him." He laughed out loud. "And you got to be there at midnight." The clock said 9:15. The waitress arrived with the check, and Christian glanced at the register. Next to it were T-shirts that said Polkin Perfect Pies. There were carved wooden handguns that shot rubber bands and a wooden train whistle. He didn't look at the old-timer as he said, "Can you add on a train whistle?" Christian stuck his hand out to the gentleman, who took it warily. "I know you don't mean any harm," which is an odd thing to say, Christian thought. "But under no circumstances do you pick up any part of that wreckage. It's like taking from the dead." It's the worst kind of person to be. Christian nodded and said goodbye. He found that location without issue. The defunct railway was still a straight line through the weeds and dirt. He tried to go live, but he couldn't get the bars to make it happen. Even though he was chilled by the idea that so many had passed there, he walked along the track, now mostly covered in dirt and weeds. He took a video to upload later, loving the way the moonlight hit the outline of the tracks. He was videoing as he looked down, and he couldn't believe what he saw. Next to his foot was an old iron rivet, smooth head and still inky black. He picked it up and held it out in the light of his phone. He thought about the old timer. He thought about the wound that was more than a century old. And then he thought about the distant idea of selling memorabilia from each location, along with t-shirts that he thought about making. Running his finger over the rivet, he stuck it in his pocket. He decided to spend the night by the tracks, thinking how good the field would look in the morning in the sunlight. He made up a bed in the back of the SUV, even he brushed his teeth. He glanced down at his phone and saw it was 11:40 p.m. It felt silly, as there were no bars to support a live broadcast, but at least he could film himself for a release tomorrow. He ran his hand over the whistle, feeling even more silly, but also more nervous than he usually got in situations like these. He thought of the old timer saying, "The worst kind of person to be," as he ran his hand over the rivet. Midnight was only 1 minute away, and he decided he would go for it. He pulled out the cigarette from a pack that he kept in his front shirt pocket. He counted down the seconds. When his phone read 12 a.m., he blew as hard as he could. At first, nothing. Just a lonesome sound of his own whistle. He felt sillier still. The whoosh of cold air blew through his whole body, instantly freezing his eyes until they ached. He pulled his jacket around him tighter and started to run for the SUV. But snow, not snow he could see, stopped his legs from moving. He felt his tongue stick to the back of his teeth. He felt the cilia in his lungs begin to burn. Terror built in him as he realized he couldn't move at all. And that's when he saw it. A steam train pulling against the night sky, the whistle screaming so loud it made his chest quake. A ride on a train that would never complete its fight against the storm. A storm that would never stop. He couldn't move. From the wind and the rain, it engulfed him, and suddenly he was inside the passenger car. There was some cigar smoke in the air. There were buttoned and velvet upholstery on every seat, but almost every seat was filled. A punk rock girl from the 80s with a Madonna-style bracelets up and down and a crop top screaming wordlessly at him. Soldiers, a businessman, newsmen. He saw a teenage boy with a high and tight 50s crew cut, crying as he stared out the window. His face was white with snowburn. Christian backed up out of instinct. He ran right into the conductor. "You got your ticket, boy?" he snarled at Christian. Christian's chattered. No. He held out the cigarette in his hand and tried to hand it to the conductor. The conductor batted it with his hand. "That ain't no ticket, boy." He reached into Christian's pocket and pulled out the rivet. This here's your ticket, boy." The next morning, the police found him. The officer touched the radio on his chest and said, "Dispatch, we got another one, hypothermia." The young new officer said, "Man, Colt, it was 70 degrees last night." Colt looked at the newbie and said, "You're going to learn not to ask that question after a while."